I have two questions for you. First, are you a dungeon master? And second, do you need monsters so that they can eat your player characters? Well, if you answered yes to both of those questions, you should buy this book. Haha, check that out. Easiest review ever. We're done here. Wait, what's that? Oh, I've got to give more details? Okay, well, today we're going to be reviewing the Bestiary and Bestiary 2 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition on this episode of the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello everyone, my name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who can always answer two questions for you very easily. First, no, it is not friendly, and second, yes, it is definitely hungry. Welcome to my channel where we talk about role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today we're going to be continuing the Local Disaster Tour Guide review series, and we're going to continue talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition products. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about the Bestiary and the Bestiary 2. These books are basically a collection of monsters for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I'm going to talk a little bit about my opinion on these books. I'm going to be talking about the things that I like. I'm going to be offering some criticisms of these books. And I'm going to give my thoughts on whether or not these books make for a good investment if you are playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Real quick before we dive into this is not a paid review in any way. I purchased both of these books for my own collection, and I am doing this series because I enjoy talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So this is not in any way a paid review. I was not sent these books. I actually purchased the special edition cover version of these books just because I wanted that for my collection. So this video and this series has been entirely something I am doing of my own accord. It is not sponsored by Paizo in any way, but as I always say in any of these review videos, the most important thing you need to know on these reviews is the best thing you can do is check out a product for yourself before you buy. I am some random guy on the internet. Hopefully, I can offer some insights into the strengths and weaknesses of this product, but nothing will ever beat taking a first-hand look at the product for yourself. So, as always, if you can borrow somebody's copy or check out a copy of one of these books at your local gaming store before you buy, that is going to be the best way to get information about whether or not this is a product that you will enjoy. But with that, let's dive into the review. So anytime that I do a review on this channel, I always like to start with my final thoughts. I want to give you my overall grade for these products, and then I like to work through my review so that you can understand how I came to the conclusion that I did. Now, I will tell you that when it comes to grading the bestiaries, this is a much more nuanced grading scale than you would normally get for an RPG product. So there's going to be a pin in the grade for both of these books, but we will talk about that in more detail in a moment. Like I said, let's start with the overall grade first. The Bestiary scores a B+ from me, and the Bestiary 2 also scores a B+ from me. Now, if you really want to split hairs, I would say that the Bestiary 1 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition is probably the slightly stronger product, but honestly, the differences between these two books are so minor that I feel comfortable essentially giving them the same grade. A big question with any RPG product is who should buy this particular product? Well, to be honest, When it comes to bestiaries and similar products from other game systems, the Dungeon Master. That's it. We'll talk about this a little more in depth as I go through the review as well, but really, this is a product that is intended for Dungeon Masters. It's intended for the storyteller. It is a very rare case that you need more than one copy of a bestiary at any particular gaming table. We'll talk about some of the side cases where additional copies might be advisable, and I'm going to give some of my preliminary thoughts on that issue in this video as well. But right now, I can comfortably say that these are excellent products that are intended for storytellers and probably nowhere near a necessary investment for any other member of a gaming group. So when we talk about grading the Bestiary and the Bestiary 2, we run into an issue that is common for monster books. And that issue is simply this: it is really hard to grade a monster book anything other than a B. Monster books are a very specialized product. They are targeted towards a very narrow section of the gaming populace. Basically, they are books for dungeon masters. These are not books that are really intended for players to have access to. Honestly, it would usually be a bad idea for players to have access to a bestiary or a similar product. So this is a very specialized product. It fills a very specific niche in terms of why you even have the book to begin with. And because monster books fit in this very narrow band as a gaming product, you don't get a lot of variation in terms of the overall quality of a monster book. Honestly, it takes a lot of work to score anything other than a B if you create a monster book. Let me give you a couple quick examples so you can see what I mean. Let me start with what I consider to be the A standard for a monster book. This is the Alien Archive from Starfinder, and the Alien Archive series in Starfinder is definitely the series of monster books that I have enjoyed the most. Alien Archive 1 and 2 are extremely strong. I absolutely love both of those books. Alien Archive 3 is a little bit weaker, but even it is still probably an A range book for me. These are outstanding within the field. They set the standard for what an A should be in a monster book. On the other extreme, I can show you the worst monster book that I own, and this was actually a very controversial book in its day. Wizards of the Coast, back when they released this product, they got a ton of pushback. This was a book that really received a lot of negative feedback, and that's the Monster Manual 4 for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. The basic flaw of the Monster Manual 4 is that it offered too many variations on the same creature type. If you look through this book, you will see a lot of here's 5 or 6 different versions of a lizard folk, or here's 7 different variations on orcs. They basically just spent too much time offering different shades of otherwise vanilla creatures. Now, if you were gaming in the 3.5 era, you may not remember the controversy that I just described, and that's because it wasn't much of a controversy. Let me tell you why. This is a Pathfinder 1st edition book, the Monster Codex. And that negative strain from the Monster Manual 4, here are a whole bunch of variations on vanilla monsters. That's literally the entire premise of this book. There are a whole bunch of versions of lizard folk and orcs and other otherwise vanilla monsters. This book is intended to be, here's how you can offer variations on otherwise standard villains in your game. Now, real quick, this book definitely did it better than Monster Manual 4 did. But Monster Manual 4, while easily being the most criticized monster book that I have ever seen, its core flaw can still produce useful game material. If I'm being honest, I used Monster Manual 4 back in the day. When I ran 3.5, I got use from that book at my gaming table. Maybe not quite as much use as I did from other monster manuals, but at the end of the day, I made use of Monster Manual 4, and overall, if I had to give Monster Manual 4 a grade, it would be a C. It wasn't the best book, but I still used it. That's the issue with grading monster books. There's not a lot of variation. If you ask me, do I use the Alien Archive? Yes, I do. If you ask me, did I use Monster Manual 4 back in the day? Yes, I did. As a Pathfinder 2 storyteller, do I use the Bestiary 1 and Bestiary 2? Yes, I do. These are innately useful books, and you really have to do something dramatic to get outside of that B range. A monster book is going to be useful, it's going to see play at your gaming table, and if you're a storyteller, you can use it. So it takes something dramatic to really get outside that B. That begs a couple of important questions. Number one, what can a monster book do to stand out compared to other similar books in other gaming systems? And number two, what do the Bestiaries for Pathfinder 2nd Edition do to try and stand out? And does it succeed? Well, there are a few common ways that monster books are going to try to stand out. One of the most common ones is artwork. Excellent artwork can take a mediocre monster to an interesting monster instantly. A lot of people really like the artwork style for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I will admit that for me personally, artwork is rarely going to be a factor, and it is very hard for artwork to stand out with me. There are maybe 10 pieces of artwork in all of gaming history that have truly stuck with me in one fashion or another, and most artwork just really blends together in my mind. So, I mean, if you like Pathfinder 2nd Edition style artwork, they've got a lot of it in this book, but it's not a standout for me. Another thing that you can do to make a monster book stand out is offer excellent flavor. The flavor of monsters has a powerful effect on whether or not a monster book is going to stand out. Now, I will say, overall, I think that Pathfinder 2nd Edition is doing a solid job on flavor for their monsters. Later on in this video, I'm actually going to do a small segment where I'm going to offer some example monsters from the Bestiary 1 and Bestiary 2, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why the flavor of those monsters stands out for me, just to give you a taste of what is in these books. But overall, I would say that Paizo is offering strong flavor for their monsters. I wouldn't say it is exceptional, but it is certainly a strong element of this book. But I wouldn't say that the flavor of this book has enough to really push the book out of that B range. So those are two examples of how a monster book can try to stand out. But really, what else can you do? Well, really quick, I want to talk about my A example, and then we'll talk about why the Pathfinder Bestiaries for 2nd Edition don't quite get there. As I said earlier, the Alien Archive series for Starfinder is my golden standard on what a monster book can be. These are easily the best monster books I've ever seen, and I want you to notice, this is a relatively thin book. Compared to other monster books, This isn't a very big book, and yet I can say that this series is a series that I love. Alien Archive 1 and 2 are both phenomenal. Alien Archive 3 is a little bit weaker, but it is still a book that I really enjoy and is probably still A tier for me. So that begs the question, how can these small books carry so much of a punch? Well, one of the things that the Alien Archive series does well is they don't just have a bunch of stat blocks. Yes, there are plenty of monsters. Yes, there are flavorful monsters, and you as a DM can go in and find plenty of options for building interesting encounters. But in every Alien Archive series so far, they have always included an extra section at the end of the book that is some other rule set that you get to play with. Alien Archive 1 literally has monster creation rules. Alien Archive 2 has polymorph rules. Alien Archive 3 has companion rules. Every single Alien Archive has added to the game in a meaningful way beyond just offering the DM a collection of stat blocks. And that is an incredible strength of the series. Another thing that really sets the Alien Archives apart is the Alien Archives are the first series of monster books that are not only for storytellers. The Alien Archives actually have a lot of player-focused material, whether it's new player races or new equipment or new feats that players can take. I don't want to deep dive the Alien Archive because that's not what I'm reviewing here, but one of the reasons that the Alien Archive series moves out of the B range and up to the A range is because they found a way to make the book useful and applicable not just to storytellers but to players as well. And that is why the Bestiaries don't quite hit A range for me. These are still Dungeon Master books. If you're a Dungeon Master, I think that the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiaries are strong. I think that there is plenty of usable material here, but this is definitely a book for you and not a book for players. It definitely stays in its lane. And that, for me, makes it really hard to move the Bestiary out of that B that I like to give monster books. Now, there are definitely strengths to this Bestiary. As I mentioned earlier, Paizo has done a very good job with the flavor of a lot of their creatures. And the way they have redesigned encounter mechanics, there are a lot of interesting and flavorful ways that they use those mechanics. There are definitely a lot of interesting monsters in these books. If you're looking for a book that does monster flavor well, Bestiary 1 and Bestiary 2, they're going to serve you well. Another thing that I really like about Bestiary 1 and 2 is, and I don't know why Paizo did this. It's a strange choice, but it's a choice that I ended up liking. They really made sidebars nice. When you're looking at the bestiaries, you'll have a paragraph or two of information about the monster, then you'll have their stat block. Some monsters, you'll have a few different versions of the monster on the same page. You know, you have a very predictable layout. And then on the sidebar of almost every page, they throw in bonus information. Sometimes it's information on famous versions of a particular monster. Sometimes it's ideas on particular pieces of treasure that you might find in that monster's lair. Sometimes it's information on how you can change around different parts of the stat block to create variations on a monster and offer a very different type of encounter. Paizo just kind of went crazy with sidebars, and I like it. Honestly and truthfully, what takes this book from a B to a B plus is just these little bonus tidbits of information that are consistently thrown in from page to page to page to page. It's like they always tried to give you just a little bit more. So if you're looking at this book, I definitely encourage you, pay attention to those sidebars. There are just a lot of fun and juicy tidbits that make the second edition Bestiaries enjoyable. It's not quite enough to move the Bestiaries into A-range books for me. I still think Paizo is keeping to their lane, but it is something I appreciate, and it is a strength of the book. So that brings me to my next topic, which is what criticisms do I have for the Bestiary and Bestiary 2 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition? And I'm going to go ahead and say I have 3 criticisms, and 2 of those criticisms are probably just me complaining because I like the Alien Archives more than I like these books. In a way, that feels almost like a cheat when it comes to a criticism, but let me just go ahead and say the Alien Archive series that Paizo publishes has proven that a monster book can be more than a monster book. In the Alien Archive series, they offer player-focused content. In the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiary series, they tease player-focused content and material. In the Bestiary 1, you get a hint of the Azamar and Tiefling, but you don't actually access that material as a player until the Advanced Player's Guide comes out later this month. Alien Archive is better because they're not teasing material, they're offering player-focused material, and you definitely feel that difference. Another major criticism that I have of the Bestiary series is, why did you put the monster building rules in the Game Mastery Guide? You just showed me with the Alien Archive series that adding that to an Alien Archive book dramatically increases the value of a monster book. You did it for Alien Archive. Why would you not put the here's how you build a monster rules in the Bestiary? It is the logical place for that material. Paizo, I don't understand why you did it so well in Starfinder and then backed away from that for Pathfinder. Maybe you're trying to keep that information away from players, but as I've already said, the Bestiary is not really a player-focused book, as is, so I don't know why you wouldn't have it in there. So those first 2 complaints really are me just wishing that Paizo did the same thing for Pathfinder 2nd Edition that it did for Starfinder, but quite genuinely, Starfinder has shown that monster books can be more than just a monster book, and I wish that they had done that for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Well, it would have kicked it up from a B+ to an A tier easily. However, there is a criticism I have of Pathfinder 2nd Edition and its Bestiaries that is definitely going to be specific to the Bestiaries. In moving to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Paizo has taken the time to really try and differentiate themselves from Dungeons & Dragons. Historically, Pathfinder was an offshoot of Dungeons & Dragons, and there's definitely some good things about that history, but you can tell with Pathfinder 2nd Edition that they are taking an active effort in differentiating their game from the other major fantasy game that's on the market. And one of the ways that they've done that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is they have renamed a lot of different monsters. For example, treants are now arboreals. And they don't tell you what monsters got renamed or where to find the monsters in the new bestiary. It can be headache-inducing. The Inevitables, through Pathfinder 2nd Edition lore, have now sided with the Aeons, and Inevitables are now a subcategory of Aeons. There's some interesting lore reasons and story hooks for why that has happened. Won't dive into that here. But wouldn't it be nice if they told you, if you're looking for Inevitables, you need to go to the Aeons section of this book? If it wasn't for the fact that it was in the A's, I probably would have missed that. Here's another one. The Abolites have been renamed as well, and hold on a second. The Alkalathuklutuka Ia Cthulhu Fatagan. You know what? I don't know how to say this word. But the Abolites have been renamed. Now, Abolites are a very important monster in the history of Golarion. Pathfinder lore definitely plays with the Abolites a lot. So if you're coming from Pathfinder 1st Edition to 2nd Edition, you know the Abolites are going to be there. And heaven help you, they don't tell you that there's a new name for those creatures. Paizo, I really wish you had taken the time to put just a simple table on the first page of the Bestiary that says, if you were looking for this monster and give us the old name, here's their new name. A simple table of here's the monsters that have been renamed in this edition would have saved me a lot of headache trying to figure out where some of my favorite monsters were. This is a common problem throughout the book. It happens a lot with elementals. There are a lot of creatures that had the elemental type in 1st edition, and now they're just in the elementals chapter in 2nd edition, and it's easy to miss them if you don't know that they deliberately moved them there. So that is a criticism for me on this book. Paizo did a lot of renaming, and they don't really clue you in on that renaming well. But those are my criticisms for the Bestiary 1 and Bestiary 2. Again, it kind of feels like I'm nitpicking. Two of my criticisms are literally just Starfinder did it better. I don't think that it detracts too much from the overall value of the book, but it is something that you should keep in mind when you're considering this product. But all right, okay, we've nitpicked a very narrow band of information. Most monster manuals are Bs. Pathfinder Bestiary 1 and 2, probably a B+ in my evaluation, but it's time to give you some samples of what these books have to offer. I wanted to pick a few monsters from the Bestiary 1 and the Bestiary 2 that are intriguing to me, and use those as just some examples of what you can hope to find. Now, real quick, here is the criteria that I used when I was considering what monsters I wanted to showcase. First off, I tried to go for monsters that were outside of bread and butter fantasy. I didn't pick orcs or kobolds or dragons or other fantasy standard monsters. I wanted to look for things that were definitely a little more unique and a little more engaging. So in both books, I tried to find things that were either new to me or that were very appealing to me, something that really just catches my interest as a storyteller. Additionally, for both books, I wanted to look for an example of a low-level monster, a mid-level monster, and a high-level monster that I considered to be interesting. My definition, a low-level monster would be anything level 5 or less. A mid-level monster would be something that runs between like level 6 and level 12, and a high-level monster would be something level 13 or higher. And I just kind of looked through the books for interesting examples of each of those, and I want to share those with you here to give you a little bit of a taste of what you might find if you open the Bestiary up. So my low-level example from Bestiary 1 is the Gremlins. Gremlins are not exactly an unknown monster, but they're a monster that I feel that hasn't gotten its fair share of the spotlight, at least in modern fantasy games, and I really enjoy the inclusion of Gremlins in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiary 1. They offer 3 different versions of Gremlins. These are all small fey creatures that can cause all kinds of problems and trouble. But my favorite of the Gremlins is actually the Mitflit or the Mite. This is an example of a creature where they have done a really good job helping the storyteller write a story about gremlins. I'm serious, if you read the Mitflit or Mite in the Bestiary 1 as a storyteller, it's going to open up a lot of options and a lot of very interesting stories that you could tell with a low-level party. I've got 2 or 3 ideas spinning around in my mind based off just one of the items inside the Mitflit stat block. So the Gremlins are a very intriguing monster from the Bestiary 1, and it's something I'm very happy that Paizo included. For my mid-level monster from the Bestiary 1, I want to highlight the Gaga Death. Mostly because I'm pretty sure this is every nightmare I've ever had rolled into a single monster, and if I ever actually saw this thing, I'm pretty sure I would immediately die from fear. The artwork on this thing is absolutely terrifying. This may be one of my top 10 pieces of gaming artwork ever, just because of how disturbing this creature is. But the Gaga Death is the crazy alien spider creature done horribly, horribly right. Bravo, Paizo. This thing scares me, and you get a shout out for terrifying me with this artwork. Finally, the high-level monster I would like to highlight from the Bestiary 1 is actually one of the monsters that Paizo bragged about a lot when they were hyping up the Bestiary 1, and that's the Mcgratty. This giant 3-headed centipede is a level 15 monster. It is a terror to fight, and it has an ability called Pull Apart, where it can literally rip a party member in half. As a psychotic DM, I have to approve of this ability. Thank you, Paizo. I'm going to have way too much fun with this creature. This thing is beautiful, it's amazing, and I cannot wait for my party to get high enough level that I can drop one of these on them. Thank you so much. This thing is beautiful. Now let's move on to the Bestiary 2. What are some monsters that I can highlight from this book that I consider to be very intriguing and interesting? My low-level monster example is going to be something of a classic. This is a monster I have seen in other books in the past, but it is a personal favorite of mine, the Crawling Hand. And for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, they have the Giant Crawling Hand. Because why should necromancers stop with just medium creature hands? Why not use giant hands as well? These are both very, very enjoyable examples of how to do low-level monsters, make them flavorful and entertaining, and Paizo, bravo, I love these. For the mid-level monster that I'd like to highlight from Bestiary 2, we're going to go over to literally the next page and talk about the Caldawin. This is a very creepy, cursed fae that is obsessed with fishing. And this is another example of Paizo doing flavor text on a creature really, really well. There are several things about the stat block of the Caldawin that just really engage me as a storyteller and really give me some ideas for some fun, creepy encounters I can throw at my players, and I absolutely love this thing. This may not be the most challenging monster that they face, but I definitely feel like the plot hooks are here for some very good stories. Finally, for high-level monsters in the Bestiary 2, I want to talk about Linorms. Linorms are variant dragons that exist inside Golarion, and They are a very interesting take on the dragon species. When you kill a Lenorm, you actually run the risk of being cursed when the creature dies. In the Galarian setting, there is actually a region called the Land of the Lenorm Kings where you can achieve political might by successfully killing one of these creatures and surviving. I think the Lenorms are a very exciting creature. I think it's a very unique take on dragons, and I really enjoy Lenorms. I think it's one of the more interesting monsters that Paizo uses in its settings, and I'm very glad for their inclusion here. My all-time favorite of the Lenorms, though, is the Cairn Lenorm, because giant crypt dragon that curses you when it dies is just story potential all over the place. So again, Paizo, absolutely love this. Fantastic inclusion. Thank you. Thank you for offering this as an option inside your book. So anyways, that was just 6 quick examples of the monsters that you can find in the Bestiary 1 and 2. There's obviously a lot more to be seen, and I definitely encourage you to look through and see what Pathfinder 2nd Edition has done with a lot of classic monsters and some of the new monsters that they are offering storytellers as well. I definitely think that there's plenty of usable material here. So before I get to my closing thoughts in this video, there is one more small thing that I'd like to talk about, and that is the question, who should buy the bestiary? Obviously, bestiaries are targeted products. They are intended specifically for dungeon masters. They're not really player-focused books, and they definitely didn't take the Starfinder route of adding player material to the bestiaries. So really and truthfully, this is a book for dungeon masters, and if you're not storytelling Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you probably don't need these products. But summoning. Pathfinder 2nd Edition has done a really good job with their summoning spells of basically saying, if you cast a summoning spell, here is the level of creature you're allowed to use, go pick. I absolutely love this premise. In older versions of Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy games, quite often summon spells had a very specific list that you had to use. And I really love the fact that Pathfinder 2nd Edition has opened up the summoning spells so that you can get a lot more variety from them. When new books come out with new creatures in them, the summoning spells are effectively automatically updated where those creatures are useful too. And that raises the question, if you want to play a summoner, do you need a bestiary as well? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. My gaming group is so large that we've kind of had a soft ban on summoners for well over a decade now. We just have so many players at our table that adding a summoner adds way too many things to the fight scene, and we don't want to slow the game down that much. So for a long time, our group has just kind of agreed we're not going to go that route, and we don't use summon monsters. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is really tempting me to try out summoning now. It looks a lot more interesting compared to previous editions of the game. I don't know if the summoning is going to be better or worse. I haven't gotten to dive into that mechanic yet, and that makes it hard for me to evaluate whether or not a player who is using a summoner style character should also go and invest in the bestiary. There is, however, a possibility that I know Paizo has put out there that might also function for your table. Paizo has released bestiary battle cards for Bestiary 1, and they have announced bestiary battle cards for the Bestiary 2. These cards have the stats for particular creatures already printed off on them. And if I had to venture a guess, I feel like those Bestiary battle cards might be a better investment if you have a player at your table who is interested in playing a summoner. When they want to summon a creature, you can give them the card and they don't have access to the whole book. I think that may be a better solution for most gaming tables, but if I am being honest here, I don't know that personally. The Bestiary battle cards are a product that I am hoping to acquire in the future, and after I acquire them and use them a little bit, I might do a video talking about them. But right now, I don't know that I can recommend the actual Bestiary book for a player. I feel like the Bestiary battle cards might be a better option if you have a player who's doing the summoner style character. Again, I wish I had more information to offer here. It's a play style that my group hasn't used a lot, and so it's a niche scenario that I haven't really seen addressed at my table. But those are my thoughts. If I had to venture a guess, a player who is looking for that information, the Bestiary battle cards might be the better way to go. I may come back to this topic in the future and offer more thoughts once I've actually used that product and have some firsthand experience with it. So let's review what we've talked about today. We've been doing a review of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiary and Bestiary 2. I gave both of these books a B+. They are definitely solidly in the monster book lane. They have a lot of the strengths you associate with typical monster books, and it is worth noting that the flavor on a lot of monsters is pretty solid. I definitely enjoy all of the fun tidbits that they did with the sidebars in the Bestiary 1 and Bestiary 2. It's a weird but entertaining addition, and I do think it helps the books stand out against similar products in other games. However, it is worth noting that the Bestiary 1 and Bestiary 2 are definitely Dungeon Master focused products. I don't feel that these books are really something that a player is going to need. I think this is primarily something a Dungeon Master would invest in. So these are good products, but they are definitely focused towards one person at the gaming table. If you're a player who is doing a summoning style character, I might suggest investigating the Bestiary battle cards instead, though I do not have firsthand experience with that product, so definitely take that with a grain of salt and investigate for yourself. Overall, these are books that do what monster books need to do and do it well, but they don't really expand out into player-focused content, so it fails to reach the standard that I would have for an A for a book like this. Additionally, it does detract from the books that they didn't include the monster builder rules in the bestiary. I really feel like they should have put that in the bestiary, not the Game Master Guide. If the bestiary is not going to be a player-focused product anyways, there was no reason for that material not to be in the bestiary. Otherwise, strong books. You're definitely going to get a lot of play out of them at your table. If you're a dungeon master who is investing in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, if you're going to be running these games, you're going to use these books, and they are definitely something that I can recommend purchasing. So Paizo has done a solid job with a product that honestly is usually pretty solid. They may not be true standouts in the field, but they are still solid products that will be a welcome addition to your gaming table. Have a fantastic day. Hey everyone, this is Mark, and normally I would be doing a post-credits volunteer shout-out at this point in the video. However, I wanted to take a moment to just kind of talk to the people who are watching this video and let you know that the content on this channel is probably going to be slowing down for the next month. There are a few situations going on with my family and with my home, and I just don't know that I can keep up the one video a week schedule that I've been trying to do. Um, some of you all may be aware that my son has some health issues that we have been facing, and that's kind of made things a little bit more complex around here. And also, just my work situation has gotten a little bit more complex thanks to COVID-19 and all of the madness that kind of surrounds that situation. I do hope to get back to one video a week. I've actually got some ideas where I may try to do 2 videos a week in the future. But at the moment, I cannot guarantee the pace that I have been keeping. So please know that this channel is still going to continue, that I'm still going to have these conversations, and I still look forward to interacting with you and just continuing to talk about this hobby that we all love. But for the near future, I am going to try to slow down to maybe one video every 2 weeks rather than a video every week. And hopefully, after things calm down a bit, I can pick back up to my normal schedule. That being said, I would still like to encourage you, get out there, volunteer, make a difference in your community, be a blessing to others, and have a wonderful day. Oh my goodness, it's a Nicholas. A Nicholas has crashed my video yet again. Hey, buddy. Thank you. Thank you for making a guest appearance in Daddy's video. I love you. Say hi to everybody.